Like, comment, subscribe. In the play's opening scene, a long-standing feud between the Montague and Capulet families continues to disturb the peace of Verona, a city in northern Italy. A fight between the servants of the feuding households erupts. Benvolio, a Montague family member, tries to break up the fight, but one of the Capulets, Tibulus, starts fighting with Benvolio. The Prince of Verona arrives to break up the fight. He informs the head of the Montague and the head of the Capulet family that they'll be put to death if this ever happens again. Subsequently, Mr. Montague and Lady Montague ask Benvolio where their son Romeo was during the fight. Benvolio reveals that Romeo has been depressed and keeping to himself because he is heartbroken. He's fallen madly in love with a young lady named Rosaline, but Rosaline does not want Romeo, nor is she in love with him. Benvolio encourages heartbroken Romeo to forget his undying love for Rosaline and find someone else to love. Meanwhile, Count Paris, a relative of the prince, wants to marry the Capulets' only daughter, Juliet. But the Capulets want Paris to wait a couple of years because Juliet's only 13. But the Capulets want to see if their daughter Juliet is interested in him, so they invite Paris to a masquerade feast that night at their home. The Capulet's servant walks around town trying to invite a list of people to Capulet's feast. The problem is, the servant can't read, so he stops Benvolio and Romeo and asks them for help. Romeo sees Rosaline's name on the list and Benvolio says they should crash the party. So Romeo can compare Rosaline to other girls and then Romeo will get over her. Romeo agrees to go, but just so he can see Rosaline. Lady Capulet and Juliet's nurse discuss the fact that Paris wants to marry Juliet. Lady Capulet and the nurse spoke highly of Paris to Juliet. So, she agrees to meet him to see what all the hype is about. Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio attended the feast wearing masks. At the party, Romeo sees Juliet and forgets all about Rosaline. He's in love with Juliet upon first sight. The Capulet's nephew, Tybalt, recognizes Romeo's voice and is furious that Romeo snuck into the feast. The Capulet order Tybalt to let it go because he doesn't want to fight at his feast. In another room, Romeo snuggles up to Juliet, holds her hand and even gets her to let him kiss her. They talk to each other in poetry. After this encounter, each one tries to find out who the other is because they are both still wearing their masks. Initially, they're upset to find out they're from rival families that had been feuding for generations, but both of them decide they're too in love to let their love die because of some silly feud. After the party, Romeo ditches his friends and climbs over an orchard wall to see Juliet. He sees her on her balcony talking to herself before she realizes Romeo is listening. Juliet says she's in love with him. Romeo steps out of his hiding spot and says he loves her too. Romeo asks his priest Friar Lawrence if he'll conduct a marriage ceremony. Friar Lawrence is concerned about how quickly Romeo switched from Rosaline to Juliet, but agrees to do it because he thinks it will bring peace to the feuding families. Mercutio and Benvolio tell Romeo that Tybalt wants to challenge him to a duel. Juliet's nurse comes along wanting to talk to Romeo in private. Romeo tells her to have Juliet come to Friar Lawrence's that afternoon so they can get married. Juliet meets Romeo and the friar marries them. Later, Tybalt finds Romeo and tries to start a fight, but Romeo won't fight Tybalt because he is his new wife cousin, but Mercutio, close friend to Romeo, steps in to fight Tybalt. Romeo tries to break them up, but Tybalt shoves his sword under Romeo's arm and stabs Mercutio, then runs off. Mercutio dies, cursing both families. Romeo is enraged. When Tybalt returns, Romeo kills him then flees. The prince arrives and Benvolio tells him what happened. The prince declares that Romeo is banished from Verona. Juliet is impatiently waiting for her wedding night with Romeo when the nurse comes in and tells her that Romeo killed Tybalt and has been banished. Juliet is mad at Romeo at first, but then decides she's on Romeo's side. Juliet sends the nurse to tell Romeo to spend the night with her. Friar Lawrence breaks the news to Romeo that he has been banished. Upon hearing that Romeo wants to kill himself, the nurse arrives and tells Romeo to go to Juliet that night. Friar tells Romeo to go to Mantua the next morning and wait for the friar to send word. Mr. Capulet decides he's going to force Juliet to marry Count Paris in 3 days. After spending the night together, Romeo and Juliet playfully argue about whether it's dawn until they can't deny it. Finally, Romeo leaves. Lady Capulet tells Juliet she has to marry Count Paris. Juliet refuses, but Mr. Capulet himself comes in and tells her he'll disown her if she doesn't do it. Juliet goes to see Friar Lawrence and tells him that she'll kill herself if he can't show her a way out of her predicament. He gives her a vial with a drug in it and tells her to agree to the marriage, then take the drug the night before the wedding. For 42 hours she'll seem like she's dead, and the family will lay her in the family tomb. Then the Friar Lawrence will write Romeo to tell him what's happening, and the two will be waiting when she wakes up, and Romeo can then take her off to Mantua. Juliet agrees. Juliet goes to her father and tells him that Friar Lawrence has taught her to be obedient. Mr. Capulet is so happy with the change of heart that he moves the wedding to the very next day. That night Juliet debates with herself about taking the drug, thinking about how scary it would be to wake up in a tomb, but she decides to take it anyway. The next day the Capulets find Juliet in bed dead. Friar Lawrence arrive for the wedding, but Mr. Capulet, Lady Capulet, the nurse and Count Paris all cry and say death has robbed them, but Friar Lawrence tells them that Juliet is in a better place. They prepared to take Juliet to her tomb. In Mantua Romeo wakes up expecting good news. His servant Balthazar arrives and tells him Juliet is dead, so Romeo decides to kill himself next to Juliet. So, he goes to an apothecary, a guy who makes and sells medications who's really poor, and bribes the man to sell him poison, which is a capital crime. A priest named Friar John tells Friar Lawrence that he couldn't deliver the news about Juliet's fake death to Romeo because Friar John says he was quarantined because the authorities thought he was exposed to the plague. Friar Lawrence sends him out to get a crowbar, and says that Juliet will wake up within 3 hours, and will be angry with him for not telling Romeo. Paris comes to the tomb with his page, and tells the page to go lie down under some trees, and whistle if anyone approaches, to brings flowers to Juliet's grave. The page whistles because Romeo is coming, so Paris hides. Romeo arrives and he tells Balthazar to go, but Balthazar hides and sticks around anyway. Romeo opens the tomb and Paris tries to arrest Romeo. Romeo tells him he's there to kill himself and states that he doesn't want to hurt Paris, but Paris insists on arresting him, so they fight. The page runs off to get the watchman. Romeo kills Paris. Before Paris dies he asks to be laid by Juliet and Romeo agrees. He drags Paris' body into the tomb. Romeo kisses Juliet, takes his poison, kisses her again, and dies lying across Juliet's chest. Friar Lawrence arrives in the churchyard, finds out from Balthazar that Romeo's there, and goes into the tomb to find Juliet awake. He explains that the plan didn't, and that work some higher power stopped it. He tells her that she needs to leave and he'll find a place for her as a nun. He runs away because he thinks the Watcher is coming. Juliet refuses to leave. She sees that Romeo has poisoned himself and kisses him, hoping to get some of the poison. Then she hears people coming, so she takes Romeo's dagger and stabs herself with it. The Chief Watchman arrives and finds the bodies. He sends the other watchmen to round up anyone looking in the vicinity, and to get the prince, the Capulets, and Montagues. The watchmen round up Balthazar and Friar Lawrence. Friar Lawrence explains everything that's happened. The prince says the Capulets and the Montagues have been punished for their feud, and the prince has been punished for tolerating their feud, because he's lost 2 relatives, Mercutio and Paris. The Montagues promises to make a golden statue of Juliet, and the Capulets promises to make one of Romeo. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time. We release new videos every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Subscribe now, so you never miss a video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.